Today was supposed to be the happiest day of Joy's life. And it was. She married the man she loved. The man who gave up everything just to be with her. The man who chose her over wealth. The man who chose her over status. The man who chose her over a life most people dream about. But even on the happiest day of her life, something was missing. Two people were missing. And no matter how much she smiled today, she felt it. My name is Patience. And welcome to a Tanologue. The wedding was beautiful. Not because it was expensive. Not because it was grand. But because it was real. Family members filled the venue. Friends laughed together. People smiled. People danced. People celebrated. And in the middle of all that happiness stood Stephen and Joy. Husband and wife. Finally, Stephen could not stop smiling. Every time he looked at Joy, he smiled again. Even Noble noticed. At one point he walked over and shook his head. This is getting serious. Stephen laughed. What is getting serious? You. Noble pointed at him. You have been smiling for hours. Stephen laughed again. It is my wedding day. Noble nodded. Exactly. This is why I stay single. Stephen rolled his eyes. Noble continued. You gave up your billionaire life. Stephen smiled. Not this again. Oh yes. Noble pointed at him dramatically. If somebody told me 2 years ago that Stephen would leave his company, leave his mansion, and move to a small town because of love, I would have laughed. Stephen shook his head. You talk too much. Noble smiled. And yet you still keep me around. The two laughed. Across the venue, Joy watched them. A small smile appeared on her face. Stephen looked up. Their eyes met. And for a moment, nothing else mattered. The wedding continued. Pictures were taken. Food was served. People talked. People laughed. And slowly, the day began coming to an end. A short time later, Joy walked over to Stephen. Can we go somewhere? Stephen immediately nodded. Of course. Joy looked down for a moment, then softly said, I want to visit my parents. Stephen's expression changed immediately. Not because he was surprised, because he understood. He gently held her hand. Okay. Neither of them said anything else. They simply left, still wearing their wedding clothes. The sky had become dark. Rain had started falling. Not heavy rain, just enough to make everything feel quiet. Far away from the wedding venue, a man stood alone inside a cemetery. He stood in front of 2 graves. His clothes were old. His face looked tired, like life had not been easy for him. His eyes stayed on one of the graves, the grave marked with the name Frank. The man said nothing. He simply stood there. Then suddenly he heard voices. He quickly looked up. Someone was coming. Immediately, he stepped back, then moved behind a large tree nearby, hidden, waiting, watching. A few moments later, Stephen and Joy entered the cemetery. Neither of them noticed him. Stephen held an umbrella over both of them as they walked. Joy carried flowers. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from emotion. The closer they got, the harder it became for her to stay calm. Eventually they stopped. 2 graves stood side by side. One belonged to her mother. The other belonged to her father. Even though her father's body was never found. Even though nobody truly knew what happened to him, the family still created a grave for him. A place to remember him. A place to visit. A place to grieve. For several seconds, Joy simply stared. Then she slowly bent down and placed the flowers in front of both graves. Her eyes were already wet. Stephen remained beside her quietly. Joy took a deep breath, then smiled. A small smile. The kind that appears when somebody is trying very hard not to cry. Hi, Mum. Her voice shook slightly. Hi, Dad. More tears filled her eyes. I got married today. She laughed softly through her tears. I know you already know that. She wiped her face, then looked at both graves again. I wish you were there. Her voice became weaker. I really wish you were there. Stephen lowered his eyes. Joy swallowed, then forced another smile. Dad! She pointed gently towards Stephen. This is Stephen. She looked at Stephen, then looked back at the graves. My husband. Tears rolled down her face. Joy smiled again. He is the one I told you about. Stephen's chest tightened. Joy continued. He is kind. She wiped her face again. He is patient. Another tear escaped. He takes care of me. She looked down briefly, then smiled. And he makes me feel safe. Her voice, almost broke on the last sentence. Then she turned toward Stephen. Stephen! Stephen looked at her. Joy gave a weak smile. Aren't you going to greet my parents? For a moment Stephen felt emotional himself. Then he stepped forward slightly. Good afternoon, sir. His voice was calm. Good afternoon, Ma. He looked at both graves. It is nice to finally meet you. Joy smiled through her tears. Stephen continued, I promise I will take care of your daughter. That was all he could manage before emotion caught his throat. Joy looked back at the graves. A few seconds passed. Then she softly laughed. Dad, you would have liked him. She wiped her face again. You really would have. More tears came. And Mum. Her voice became weaker. You would have loved today. She looked down at her wedding clothes. I wore something beautiful. A tear fell. I wanted you to see it. Another tear. I wanted both of you to see it. Her breathing became uneven now. The emotions were becoming too much. She looked at the graves, then looked away, then looked back again, trying to stay strong, trying not to break, but it was becoming impossible. I kept looking around today. Her voice cracked, as if you would suddenly appear. More tears. I know it sounds silly. She shook her head, but I kept looking. Her shoulders trembled. I wanted to hug you. A tear dropped onto her wedding clothes. I wanted to introduce Stephen properly. She looked at her father's grave. Dad! Her voice broke completely. I wanted you to walk me there. She looked at her mother's grave. Mum! Now she could barely speak. I wanted you beside me. Tears poured down her face. I wanted both of you. The words came out broken. Painful. Real. For years she had carried this pain. For years she had imagined this day. And now the day had finally come. But the people she wanted most were gone. Joy slowly dropped to her knees, and finally broke down. Not quietly, not politely. She cried. Years of pain. Years of missing them. Years of wishing things had been different. All of it came out. Stephen immediately knelt beside her. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, holding her, protecting her, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say. Joy buried her face against him and cried, and Stephen stayed there, holding his wife, while she mourned the parents she never stopped loving. Eventually the tears became quieter. The rain continued falling. Joy slowly stood up. Stephen helped her. Together, they looked at the graves one last time. Then they began walking away. Neither of them noticed the man watching from behind the tree. He remained hidden until they completely disappeared from sight. Only then did he slowly step out. His eyes remained fixed on the direction they had gone. His breathing became slightly heavier, almost like he had just seen something impossible. Then he slowly looked toward Frank's grave, back toward the road, then quietly whispered, Could that be? He stopped. His eyes widened slightly. Could that be Mr. Frank's daughter? The rain continued falling, and somewhere inside that cemetery, the past had just started moving again. Weeks passed, then months. Stephen and Joy slowly settled into their new life. It was different from the life Stephen once lived. Their house was small. Their neighborhood was quiet. People knew each other. Children played outside every evening. There were no bodyguards, no company meetings, no expensive parties, just a simple life, and Stephen loved it. Every morning, they ate breakfast together before Stephen left for work. Every evening, he came home looking forward to seeing Joy. Sometimes he stopped by a small roadside shop to buy roasted corn because he knew Joy loved it. Other days, he came home carrying fresh fruits or flowers he picked on the way. Not expensive flowers, just simple ones. Joy always smiled whenever he did that. You really picked flowers for me? Stephen smiled. I know somebody who likes simple things. Joy laughed and hugged him. Life was peaceful. Sometimes they cooked together. Sometimes Stephen tried helping in the kitchen. Most of the time, he only made more work. One afternoon, Joy laughed so hard because Stephen almost burnt the soup. You should stay away from my kitchen. Stephen looked offended. I was helping. You were destroying. The two laughed until their stomachs hurt. Those little moments became their happiness. Money was no longer the center of Stephen's life. Joy was. Months later, Joy became pregnant. The day she showed Stephen the test result, he stared at it for several seconds, then slowly looked at her. Really? Joy nodded with tears already forming. Stephen smiled, then laughed, then hugged her tightly. I'm going to be a father. Joy laughed through her tears. And I'm going to be a mother. Stephen lifted her gently and turned her around. The house was filled with laughter. That night they talked about names, about the baby's room, about the future. For the first time, their little house felt even bigger. But only a few weeks later, everything changed. Joy lost the baby. The doctor tried his best to comfort them. It happens sometimes. There is nothing you did wrong. But those words did not remove the pain. Joy cried the whole way home. Stephen never left her side. That night he held her until she finally fell asleep. He cried too, quietly, so she would not hear him. Months passed again. Joy slowly smiled again. She slowly started living normally again. Then she became pregnant a second time. Stephen was careful this time. Very careful. He reminded her to rest. He cooked for her whenever he could. He refused to let her carry anything heavy. Joy laughed one day. You are treating me like glass. Stephen smiled. You are carrying my whole world. Joy laughed and kissed his cheek. But once again, they lost the baby. This time, the silence inside the house became heavier. Joy stopped crying immediately. She simply sat there, looking at nothing. Stephen sat beside her. He gently held her hand. Neither of them spoke. There were no words left. A few days later they returned to the hospital. The doctors carried out different tests. After everything was finished, the doctor smiled gently. There is nothing wrong with you. Joy looked confused. Nothing. The doctor nodded. Everything looks normal. Stephen asked quietly. Then why did this happen twice? The doctor sighed. Sometimes medicine cannot answer every question immediately. He encouraged them not to lose hope. But Joy left the hospital carrying more questions than answers. From that day, something changed inside her. Fear slowly returned. Not the old fear. A different one. She began asking herself questions she never asked before. What if she could never become a mother? What if Stephen wanted children? What if one day he became tired of waiting? She never asked him. She only asked herself. One evening, she stood in front of the bedroom mirror. She looked at herself quietly. Her eyes slowly moved toward the scar on her face. She gently touched it. Then she looked at her own reflection for a long time. A painful thought entered her mind. What if one day, she whispered to herself, what if he stops loving me? Another thought followed immediately. What if he deserves someone better? Tears slowly filled her eyes. She quickly wiped them away before Stephen came home. From that day, Joy started trying even harder to become the perfect wife. She woke up earlier. She cleaned more, cooked more, asked Stephen what he wanted before he even asked. Stephen noticed it, but he thought she was simply being caring. He did not know fear was pushing her. One evening, Stephen came home carrying fresh bread. Joy smiled. You remembered? Stephen laughed. I always remember. Joy hugged him tightly, longer than usual. Stephen smiled. You are squeezing me. Joy laughed softly. I know. But inside, she was scared. Scared of losing him. Weeks passed. Stephen noticed Joy was still healing emotionally, so he became more careful around her. He gave her more space. He did not want to pressure her. He wanted her body and heart to heal first. He thought he was protecting her, but Joy misunderstood. She noticed he no longer reached for her as often, no longer held her as closely at night, no longer kissed her as often before sleeping. Stephen was only trying to be patient. Joy thought something else. Maybe he was beginning to lose interest. That fear grew quietly every day. One afternoon, Stephen came home earlier than usual. The house was unusually quiet. Joy! No answer. He walked toward their bedroom. The door was slightly open. Joy stood in front of the mirror, quickly wiping tears from her face. She heard his footsteps. Immediately, she forced a smile. You are back. Stephen looked at her carefully, then smiled gently. I am. Joy quickly turned away. I was just cleaning. Stephen slowly walked closer. You have been crying. Joy shook her head immediately. No. Stephen smiled softly. You are a terrible liar. Joy forced a small laugh. I'm serious. Stephen gently held both of her hands, then looked into her eyes. You don't have to hide your pain from me. Joy looked away. I don't want to worry you. Stephen quietly answered. You could never be a burden to me. Joy felt tears returning. She tried to stop them. Stephen gently lifted her chin. You can tell me anything. For a few seconds, Joy almost spoke. Almost. But she smiled again instead. I'm okay. Stephen knew she was not. But he did not force her. He simply hugged her. And held her for a long time. Neither of them noticed that someone else was about to change everything. The next afternoon, Stephen received a phone call from an unknown number. Hello. A calm voice answered. Am I speaking with Stephen? Yes. My name is John. There was a short silence. I believe we need to talk. Stephen frowned slightly. I'm sorry, do I know you? No. John replied quietly. But I knew Joy's father. Stephen became still. John continued. I worked at the prison. I was one of the prison guards. I was there the day Joy's father disappeared. Stephen's expression changed immediately. John took a slow breath. And what the world believes happened is not the whole truth. Stephen said nothing. His heart was already beating faster. Because for the first time, someone was finally claiming to know what really happened to Mr. Frank. Stephen stood there for a long time after the phone call ended. His phone was still in his hand. He looked at the screen. Then he immediately called the number back. The number you are trying to reach is unavailable. Stephen frowned. He tried again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. He sat down slowly. His mind was racing. A prison guard. Joy's father. Still alive. None of it made sense. He wanted to tell Joy. He really did. But how could he? He was not even sure if the man was telling the truth. What if it was a cruel joke? What if someone was trying to deceive them? What if he gave Joy hope, only for that hope to destroy her again? Stephen slowly put his phone away. No, he whispered to himself. Not yet. I need to know the truth first. That night he looked at Joy sleeping beside him. She looked peaceful. For the first time in days, Stephen gently held her hand. I won't let anyone hurt you again. He whispered so quietly she never heard him. Life continued. Every morning, Stephen woke up before sunrise. He put on his old work clothes, kissed Joy on the forehead, then left for work. The mechanic workshop was nothing like the office he once owned. The work was hard. The sun was hot. His hands became rough. His clothes were always covered in oil. Some days his whole body ached before he even got home. But he never complained, because every evening, Joy was waiting for him. And that was enough. One afternoon, Stephen was repairing a customer's car. He had worked on it for hours. Sweat covered his face. Just as he finished, his boss walked over. What took you so long? Stephen looked up. The engine had several problems. His boss shook his head. You always have one excuse. Stephen remained quiet. I wasn't making excuses. The boss spoke louder. If you worked faster, I wouldn't lose customers. Other mechanics looked over. Stephen lowered his head slightly. I'm sorry. The boss walked away. Stephen returned to work. He said nothing else. Later that same day, a customer came to collect his car. After checking it, the man looked at Stephen. You are the one that repaired it? Yes, sir. The man looked him up and down. You don't even look like a mechanic. Stephen smiled politely. I am still learning. The man laughed. No wonder it took forever. Some people nearby laughed too. Stephen simply nodded. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. The customer collected his keys and drove away. Stephen watched the car disappear, then quietly returned to work. He did not tell Joy about any of it. Whenever she asked, how was work? He always smiled. It was okay, because he wanted her to smile, not worry. But Joy was carrying her own pain. The miscarriages never left her mind. Every time she saw a mother carrying a baby, her heart became heavy. Every time someone asked, when will we hear good news? She forced a smile, then changed the subject. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror again. She looked at herself, then slowly touched the scar on her face. Her eyes filled with tears. What if, she whispered, what if I'm not enough? She quickly wiped her face before Stephen came out. She smiled, pretended everything was fine, but inside she was breaking little by little. A few days later, she decided to visit her aunt and uncle. The moment she entered the house, her aunt smiled warmly. My daughter! Joy smiled and hugged her tightly. Her uncle walked in from the sitting room. There she is. He smiled. It has been too long. Joy laughed softly. I know. Her aunt quickly led her inside. You must eat before you leave. Joy laughed again. I knew you would say that. For a while, everything felt normal. They ate together, talked, laughed. Her aunt asked about Stephen. Joy smiled. He is doing well. Her uncle nodded. He is a good man. Joy smiled proudly. He really is. Then her aunt gently reached for Joy's hand. Her voice became softer. My daughter. Joy looked at her. How are you really coping? Joy frowned slightly. Her aunt continued. After everything that happened, the miscarriages, the smile disappeared from Joy's face. Her eyes quickly became wet. She looked down, trying to stay strong, but she couldn't. The tears came without warning. She covered her face. I'm trying. Her voice broke. I'm really trying. Her aunt immediately moved closer and hugged her. Joy broke down completely. I don't know what is wrong with me, she cried. I don't know why this keeps happening. Her aunt gently rubbed her back. There is nothing wrong with you. Joy cried harder. What if I can never give Stephen a child? What if one day? She could barely continue. What if he gets tired of waiting? Her uncle quietly looked away. Her aunt held Joy tighter. My daughter, listen to me. That man loves you. Joy kept crying. I know, she whispered. But I'm scared. I don't want to lose him. That evening, Stephen tried calling John's number again. Still unavailable. He sighed, then put the phone away. 3 days later, his phone rang while he was at work. Unknown number. Stephen answered immediately. Hello, Stephen. It was John. Stephen stood up at once. I've been trying to reach you. I know, John replied. My phone got spoiled. I only fixed it this morning. Stephen felt relieved. I thought something happened. John stayed quiet for a moment, then said, We cannot talk about this on the phone. Stephen looked around the workshop. When can we meet? John answered quietly. Tomorrow evening. I'll send you the address. Stephen nodded. I'll be there. The following evening, Stephen arrived at a small restaurant on the edge of town. John was already waiting. He looked exactly the same. Older, quiet, careful. The two men sat down. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Then John looked directly at Stephen. I know this is difficult to believe. Stephen nodded. It is. John slowly reached into an old bag beside him. He carefully placed a brown envelope on the table. Stephen looked at it. What is this? Proof, John answered. Stephen slowly opened the envelope. Inside were old documents, prison records, transfer papers, and several photographs. His hands slowly stopped moving. One photograph caught his attention immediately. A man, older, thinner, but the face, Stephen had seen that face before. In Joy's family photographs. His heart started beating faster. He slowly looked up. John's voice became serious. The prison riot was never the real story. Stephen stared at him. John continued quietly. It was only a cover. Stephen could barely breathe. John leaned forward, then said the words Stephen never expected to hear. Joy's father is still alive. Silence. Stephen looked back at the photograph. His hands were shaking. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. And this story just keeps getting more interesting. If you're interested in part 3, let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, drop a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Every single comment means the world. And for more stories like this, hit subscribe and stay with us.